Every night at midnight, Jenkins ground to a halt for 15 minutes. The culprit? 200 jobs with at daily cron, all triggering at the exact same second. Let's break down Jenkins build triggers, how it works, and the exact mistake behind that failure. Jenkins build triggers are conditions that automatically start a build. They can be time-based like cron, source code change-based like webhooks or pollSCM, or dependency-based like upstream triggers. In declarative pipeline, triggers are defined inside the triggers block. The cron trigger is the most common time-based trigger. Jenkins extends cron with the h# symbol to distribute load. For example, h15 means every 15 minutes, but starting at a random minute within the hour. This prevents the thundering herd problem where all jobs trigger at the same time. The pollSCM trigger periodically checks the SCM for changes. It's a fallback when webhooks aren't feasible, but it's resource-intensive. Each poll hits the SCM server, and if you have many jobs, it can cause load. In declarative pipeline, use pollSCM h/5* inside triggers. The upstream trigger starts a build when another job completes. You can filter by result to avoid cascading failures. For example, trigger integration tests only if deploy succeeded. Use the upstream function with a threshold like Hudson model, result, success. GitHub Webhook trigger is the most common SCM webhook. When you push to GitHub, Jenkins receives a post and triggers the appropriate job. For multi-branch pipelines, it's built in. Always verify webhook delivery in GitHub's Recent Deliveries tab. Bitbucket Webhook works similarly to GitHub but uses the Bitbucket plugin. For cloud, the endpoint is /bitbucket hook. For server, it's /bitbucket server hook/. Ensure correct credentials and repository access. GitLab Webhook uses the GitLab plugin. It can trigger on merge requests, tags, and pushes. Always configure a secret token both in GitLab and Jenkins to reject unauthorized requests. The job name in the URL must match exactly. The generic webhook trigger plugin is the Swiss Army knife. It allows Jenkins to receive any HTTP post and trigger a job based on JSON path expressions. You can extract variables from the payload and pass them as build parameters. Use a strong token for security. Parameterized triggers allow you to pass parameters when triggering another job. In pipeline, use the build step with parameters. For example, after building a Docker image, trigger a deployment job with the image tag. In declarative pipeline, triggers are defined inside the triggers block at the top level. You can combine multiple triggers. However, webhooks are still configured via UI. Always commit trigger config with the pipeline for version control. When multiple triggers are configured, they can cause duplicate builds. Use a quiet period to coalesce changes. In production, prefer one primary trigger, like webhook, and disable others to avoid duplicates. Freestyle jobs have triggers in the UI, which is simple but not version controlled. Pipeline jobs define triggers in code, which is better for reproducibility. However, webhook endpoints still require UI configuration. This is the same issue we highlighted at the start. Here's exactly why that happened. We had 200 jobs all using at daily cron, which translates to 00, exactly midnight. They all fired simultaneously, overwhelming the SCM server and Jenkins executors. The master's JVM ran out of memory handling the burst. The root cause was using at daily cron trigger on 200 jobs, causing all to fire at exactly 00, 00, and overwhelm SCM and JVM. This misconfiguration enabled simultaneous load that crashed the master. The fix was simple. Change all at daily to H0, random between 00, 00, and 01, 00, and add a global quiet period of 5 seconds. Also reduced concurrent builds per node. This spread the load and prevented the stampede. Using at daily or absolute minutes like */5 causes all jobs to trigger at the same time, leading to load spikes. Always use h# syntax to spread load. If you have both webhook and pollSCM, you'll get duplicate builds, one from push, one from poll. Disable pollSCM if webhook is working or set a quiet period. Without a result threshold, downstream builds trigger even if upstream fails. Always add threshold, Hudson.model, result, success to prevent cascading failures. The article mentions testing webhooks with curl, but doesn't show a concrete example. Use this snippet to simulate a GitHub push event to verify your webhook trigger works before relying on it in production. The article warns about token security, but doesn't emphasize that the token should be stored as a Jenkins credential and referenced via token credentialid in the generic trigger configuration. Hard-coding the token in the pipeline script exposes it in SCM and logs. The article notes that cron expressions are evaluated in the master's timezone, but it doesn't mention that Jenkins 2.44+ supports the timezone parameter in the cron trigger for declarative pipeline. This allows specifying a timezone like America, New York to avoid DSD issues. To debug triggers, first check the webhook delivery log in the SCM, e.g., GitHub recent deliveries. Use curl to simulate the webhook. For pollSCM, check the poll log in the job page. Also monitor Jenkins system log for incoming requests. Let's run through some common interview questions. What is hash syntax? Replaces minute with job name hash to prevent thundering herd. How to trigger from GitHub push? Use GitHub plugin or branch source. Configure webhook. Difference between pollSCM and webhook? pollSCM polls periodically. Webhook is push-based real-time. And a few frequently asked questions. What does H15 mean? Every 15 minutes with random offset per job. Can I use cron and webhook together? Yes, but may cause duplicates. Use quiet period. How to pass parameters downstream? Use Parameterized Trigger plugin or build step. To recap, always use hash syntax for cron to avoid thundering herd. Prefer webhooks for real-time triggering. Filter upstream triggers by result to prevent cascading failures, and version control your pipeline triggers for consistency. Thanks for watching. The full article and code examples are covered in detail at TheCodeForge.io.